quickly before we wrap the pod up here, last night, Marie, you were on the show, but tonight, actually, maybe it's last night, or maybe this might release tonight on Thursday, or maybe tomorrow, Friday morning, time cop. But either way, there was some controversy arose. You know, Chris Charlton, his name. We talked about it more in depth on PWT live show. So check that out if you guys haven't on YouTube. But also, you broke it down on your channel and your Spotify, everything. You're everywhere. So, Squared Circle Pod, and you broke it down, and you in your newsletter as well, you broke it down, and you came with all the receipts and the facts and all of that, whether some people like that or not. And ultimately, just to sort of summate it, Chris Charlton said he was going at AEW, sort of a la Gabe Kidd, the same way Gabe Kidd does the work shoot work angle, where he's like, is he being honest or not? He's calling Tony a mark. He's saying, what kind of company doesn't promote whatever? He's trashing AEW. He's trashing AEW wrestlers. He's getting in fake work shoot fights with Kenny Omega and stuff like that. And so when you're in an invasion, or not, it's not an invasion, but it's AEW versus New Japan. Like, that's what this card is. It's AEW versus New Japan versus ROH versus Stardom, or whatever the CML was involved, right? That's the whole concept behind it. And so the New Japan guy, Chris Charlton, the storyteller, like, he's the guy who is, Gabe Kidd came back from his mental illness, and now he's fighting through the mental toughness of this man is what we should be focused on. Like, he's doing that sort of thing. So you're like, he's telling you what you need to know. And he starts shooting on AEW, saying, Tony Khan, the money mark, which, like, that's what you say. Like, Gabe Kidd said the same shit. Of course, that's what you say, okay? And basically, he gets sent on, like, some sort of leave. Marie's like, he wasn't even supposed to be on some of these, whatever. Tony Schiavone wasn't on last night's Dynamite or whatever.
Yeah.
But he also... people are like, no, it had nothing to do with that, which could be because he tweeted some out. He's like, hey, Chris, go for yourself. Also, like, you're smelly. Like, anyone who's ever worked with you, you stink. That's Tony Schiavone saying that to some kid grinding his way up in this wrestling world. Like, what a bunch of goofy nonsense. And then Schiavone deleted it, so I don't believe it was a work. I think that he was being real, like, sticking up for Tony Khan, which, like, Tony, you're a crybaby bitch, okay? Let's just put it that way. Both Tonys, Tony Schiavone and Tony Khan. But, ultimately, what had happened was, as we transition into our next segment, and it is everybody's favorite segment, and it is called Dave Meltzer's Dumb Moment of the Week. So Dave Meltzer basically has a meltdown on X, and I screen grabbed some of these. We're not going to go through the whole Meltzer folder, but we're just going to focus on this particular instance that had to do with New Japan. So what I quote tweeted, I grabbed 4 screen grabs here. I'm going to go through them each with you. And Dave Meltzer says, this is what I tweeted out. I go, Dave Meltzer's coping over Tony Khan getting a New Japan employees basically fired. Now remember, guys, it's Twitter. I'm being a smartass. I know he's not basically fired, but you have to leave your job. Is it a paid leave? He has to go home till when? Till Tony's feelings aren't hurt? Like, it's all up in the air, and it's kind of gross. So, basically fired. And so Dave Meltzer coping over Tony Khan getting New Japan employees basically fired, and WWE Raw on Netflix by talking about Vince McMahon and Ted Turner again. Speaks for itself. So literally, Dave starts going off about, could you imagine? A heel commentator wouldn't, or he wasn't the heel commentator. And Marie's like, no, he was the heel. He is a heel commentator mostly.
Yeah.
And then Meltzer, and we're going to break it down, but Meltzer goes off and says, I have some here, but he starts talking about Vince, Ted Turner. He's like, could you imagine? Vince would never. Let's read it. And it's like, yes, Vince would have done that. What do you mean? He let himself get buried on One Night Stand. He literally let Heyman go out there and bury the WWE on ECW One Night Stand. Yes, Vince would do that. And also Vince, he's a scumbag. You don't think Triple H would do that? Would let them do that? Especially if it's like an AEW versus, imagine WWE versus TNA. They're not going to let TNA take some shots.
Also, if we want to talk about heel commentators, more to your point, Jesse the Body Ventura was like, he went off the cuff every single time. He said whatever he wanted to say, and like that was the most heelish, like being a heel. Jerry the King Lawler was a heel on commentary, and he went after Stu Hart and the Hart Dynasty, all that kind of stuff. Like he was really going in on Stu Hart. you had a lot of people that played heel commentators, and for this particular situation with Chris Charlton, he's the NJPW pride and soul guy, and he's really like on the side of NJPW. So he's going to be like a heel person.
Exactly. And then Meltzer's trying to say, well, Vince would never let that happen to WWE. And it's like, well, Vince isn't in charge. And also, yes, he has let people do that to WWE. Yes, he's done that. So what are you talking about? It's insane for Dave to cope like this, but let's read some of this stuff. So this Mike Markart goes, him appearing at WrestleMania, that's not something I would have doubted. He's on the board now, so he has a vested interest in the show's success. But when you talked about his schedule could impede, this has to do with The Rock, I believe. Yeah. So sorry. He goes, but the question was worded to him. Sorry, the people who took it as him saying, sorry, I think that's about The Rock. So anyways, my botch. Moving on. This guy says, I was genuinely asking if he is credible, speaking about Chris, and has the reputation you say, then he is just being a regular heel announcer. No one should suspend him for that. Meltzer goes, he's not a heel announcer.
Which is a lie.
That's a Meltzer. You're caught in a lie.
Liar!
Like I debunked like most of the stuff with like what he done in the past, what him and Kevin Kelly has done on multiple occasions, and I said it before that whenever it comes to Wrestle Kingdom, Chris Charlton is the most fired up, passionate guy there is, and he does say stuff with like super passion, and Kevin Kelly would just be like right there to either like counter him or even also be passionate, like, you know, he does that.
For real, though, just insane. And you just owned him there. And so Meltzer goes, so this guy goes, look up Billionaire Ted skits on YouTube with the Huckster and Nacho Man. Vince was super salty when they went to WCW and had cringy ass videos weekly. And this is Meltzer coping about he's like, his behavior during that first XFL season was something as well. When a car sponsor pulled out, the sane folks at NBC literally had to talk Vince off a ledge as he wanted to blow up a car of their brand on the air. Even trying to make comparison would be. So he's talking about like, and then Dave saying like even making the comparison to Vince and whatever. It's like, but that's what you're doing, dude. And he's like, think about this for all the people calling anyone soft. So he's defending Tony because we say, dude, Tony's soft. This guy made one comment. And now, Dave, think about this for all the people calling anyone soft. And they're talking about Vince McMahon, bro.
I don't understand. Vince is not there.
He's not there. And like, okay, yeah, his enemies, right? But as far as when you're the people he had a working relationship with, Vince wouldn't do that. ECW, again, one night stand. He let Joey Styles and Paul Heyman talk, bury WWE right on that show because he was working with them. But when Ted was his competition, he went all out on them. Yes, just like Tony's called people bald assholes, all of that. That's not what we're saying. We're saying Tony's soft because what he does is if you speak out against him or if you're friends with people that he doesn't deem okay, or if you get over and he's not the one who he thinks it's his idea, like Athena, he buries you. He sticks you. If you get over and it's not his idea, he buries you away in Ring of Honor. If you speak out or you go, yeah, CM Punk, I like that guy, he buries you away. If you're a Ricky Starks, he just doesn't book you. And then you go and try and get booked, and then he pulls you off of booking and replaces you with Chris Jericho. That's soft, bro. And then to make it about Vince,
that's like, what
the are you doing, bro? This isn't 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago. This isn't like, what are you doing? So Meltzer saying, think about this for all the people calling anyone soft.
And also, just for people out there listening, you know, I'm not just agreeing with Phil here because we're buddies and we enjoy having conversations about wrestling. I'm also agreeing because I say it too, that we're watching this in real time. And isn't that enough evidence where you can watch something in real time, make a judgment about it? And if the same pattern keeps happening over and over and over again, even though it's a pick and choose, shouldn't the conclusion be that, there's something wrong going here and Tony Khan needs to talk about it, maybe take some accountability, maybe get on a podcast and really tell the truth with people who can ask the hard questions and don't let him deviate? Like, sooner or later, Tony Khan's going to have to like really talk about all the baggage that Uncle Dave and the rest of the gossipers are giving AEW to hold on to, because if you haven't noticed, WWE has been more enjoyable. Not to make this into an AEW versus WWE thing, but ever since WWE decided to switch up all the management and kick out any kind of mole that will leak information out to the public, it has been more enjoyable and has been so much better. But as you can see, all of the drama that happens with no substantial evidence is dragging AEW down, and they're dragging New Japan down when they're supposed to be partners and they're supposed to be elevating each other. Yeah. So I'm not just agreeing with Phil here because we're buddies. I'm agreeing because both him and I see the pattern. We see the obviousness. And this is what we agree on because we recognize the evidence. If you're not recognizing the evidence, then stay in your bubble. Yeah, it's on you. Stay in your bubble. But wrestling needs to adapt. People need to adapt. Fans need to adapt. If you are not adapting, you're going to end up dying in the industry.
And Dave has not adapted. That's why he projects onto everyone else and goes, old podcasters, they're senile and they don't.
Yeah, right.
Not, they don't know. They don't study and learn, because he is literally trapped in like an old. He just doesn't understand. Like, he's left behind, so he projects that on everyone else. Speaking of evidence, though, further evidence like of Tony being just soft. Okay, we had Ant Evans on this show. Ant Evans worked with the UFC. He also worked with TNA. Was Scott D'Amore's right-hand man, working alongside him in with the whole TNA revitalization. Man, like, they came back. They made a comeback, and AEW went over there, and what did Tony Khan do? He was all over TNA in those little info.
Oh, yeah.
Tony Schiavone and Ant Evans wrote some one-liners for people to say back, and D'Amore was like, no, just don't. And it wasn't like, he never said, I was explicitly told don't say anything, but it was like, don't say anything. You know what I mean? Don't say, because this kid he's just soft, and it's just going to turn into a temper tantrum. And why deal with it? Whatever. We got Kenny here, and Kenny did numbers for them, for real. Kenny helped them a lot going over there. I know TNA got the end of the stick in the partnership overall in the long run, but either way, Scott D'Amore didn't want to rock the boat either. Not that anyone told him, but because he just basically understands, like, Tony's soft. He's not going to take it well. And that's also, so you guys know, Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling or whatever, D'Amore started up. So they have a talent relationship / allegedly, maybe not, I may have heard, but I'm not a dirt sheet, so I'm just a goober clown. I'm a gossiping dick pill seller. No, just kidding. But, Tony might also be helping, like, send talent there in exchange for, like, we get a first dibs on anything that gets traction over at Maple Leaf there. You guys know what I'm saying? So D'Amore just didn't want to burn any bridges, but exactly. They had to sit there and let Tony make fun of them, but then he can't take it back. They can't say anything back. Same thing.
And that's wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Same
wrong.
thing here. They can say whatever about New Japan, and New Japan wrestlers can say whatever, but then Tony has to lash out on someone, because if he doesn't like it, and that's why I'm telling you, John Moxley says all the same CM Punk was saying, but he says it in character now, and he says it, and Tony Khan's okay with it, so he's allowed to say it. No one's going to storm his locker room, and it's the same with this Chris Charlton. Now, Gabe Kidd is him and Kenny and Tony are in on that together. That's why Gabe Kidd can say whatever he wants about Tony, because Tony thinks it's his idea. But the second Chris Charlton says something and Tony it wasn't okayed with me, then he's softish and he overreacts, and this happens. And whether this is a work shoot to drum up more of a rivalry, I don't think it is, from knowing a bit of, behind the scenes stuff, things DM'd and things. I don't think it is. I think Dave is really they're really mad at this Charlton guy. I really believe that. And Dave's really defending Tony here. And this just makes you all look more soft by trying to compare it to Vince, because it's just not even a comparison.
Well, I will say this though, right? Because so I have my newsletter and also my podcast dedicated to debunking the Dave Meltzer tweet about Chris Charlton, right? Because I'm like, listen, there has to be somebody in the wrestling community to have like a fair and honest, like, authenticity within the media landscape that could be very manipulative, right? So that's out. Today I dropped the transcript from the Wrestle Dynasty commentary, so that way, and it's word for word, And there's also a little tiny article to explain that the commentators were doing it for story purposes and no like personal stuff, even though you could probably say it was personal, but it's really not. So anyway, I dropped that newsletter with the actual transcript. It's word for word because I do not want any of the dirt sheets and I do not want Uncle Dave to start twisting words, saying stuff out of context, saying stuff with no evidence, just putting stuff out there. I don't want this to become another CM Punk and Elite drama, he said, she said kind of deal, because we don't need that. New Japan doesn't need that. Chris Charlton doesn't need that, because Chris Charlton is one of their best guys in New Japan Pro Wrestling, and it would be sad to see him go over, something that could have been easily a 1, 2, 3, pick up the phone and talk to him. So if anyone is interested, that transcript is directly on my newsletter. Yes. And by the way, since I've been covering Dave Meltzer, I lost 3 people.
Well, I'll tell you this, Dave Meltzer, you need to do better, buddy. You need to do better. So Meltzer he responds, this guy goes, I believe it. He seems like someone who will never let a grudge go when he feels he has been wronged. Exactly.
Yes.
Given examples also. Another example, Tony likes to call WWE bald assholes, but then it blows up in his face, and then he goes and says, to be AEW is to be under constant attack. He wants to call people stupid. Harvey Weinstein, but he doesn't like it when people, it's a petulant billionaire, rich, unable to associate with normal people, never had anyone tell him no in his life. That's all it is. So Meltzer goes, I don't know about that. My impression is he loves to bring back guys who have hated him. I know of guys who never let a grudge go and would never put Vince in that group. So I think they're actually talking about Vince as well here too.
Yeah,
as far as overreacting to things, yes, he'd be on that list. So they're trying to say, well, Tony didn't overreact. Actually, Vince overreacted. You guys remember Vince? He overreacted. He'd hold a grudge, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, why are you guys spending your day talking? And Dave Meltzer, by the way, didn't have one tweet about Monday Raw on Netflix that day. He didn't have one tweet about the event or anything on the Raw Monday Netflix day,
because he probably didn't buy Netflix. Like, he didn't get a subscription. Like,
he was in a closet crying somewhere. 100%. Yeah, they're just making about Vince McMahon. They're
man, it's stupid.
Ultimately, it's a big L, rest in peace, but not that big L. It's a big loss. It's a big loser for Meltzer and the Brady bunch of goobers that continue to just, I don't know, man, just allow these dirt sheet weirdos to just invent crazy and put it out there. And then when people get the facts, they want to cry and say like, oh no, you don't have the fact. And then it's proven they're wrong. Like, Meltzer's been wrong more than anyone ever in the last year or two, especially. And he wants to sit here like he knows or whatever. I mean, he's a goober. Marie Shadows knows what's up, especially when it comes to New Japan. I say more than Meltzer, other than the style. He just loves the style. I'm sure he gave every match 12 stars. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Dave, stay in your goddamn lane. Check out Marie Shadows' transcript. Maybe you get triggered by it. Who knows? And yeah, do better, Dave. And that was Dave Meltzer's dumb moment of the week.